How did the Lord of the Rings become a secret weapon in Italy's culture wars? Are you about to call Tolkien a fascist? Because I have a feeling you're about to call Tolkien a fascist. I saw this Guardian article about Italy's right-leaning Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni loving The Lord of the Rings, and at first, I thought it was old news because I'd seen a similar story back in 2022. That article claimed that the far-right in Italy used Tolkien's stories to push their political views. I assumed the Guardian article was a reprint of that piece, but I checked, and it turned out to be by different authors. However, this wasn't the only one. When I searched for the older article, I didn't just find that one, but dozens of articles, mostly written in the last year, all criticizing Italy's far-right's love of Tolkien. The article's core argument is about the fascist leanings of Italy's far-right, and I only needed to read that to know exactly where this was going. The author will use the far-right's love of Tolkien as an indictment against Tolkien and his works. After all, if fascists love his work, there must be a reason why, because it's totally not possible for bad people to like good things. That brings us to the Guardian article written by Jamie McKay, where he opens by wondering what Meloni's government is, quote, trying to achieve by stamping its mark so aggressively on one of the world's most loved fantasy sagas. Now, I don't know much about Meloni or Italy's current political situation, so I'm just going to take McKay's word that Meloni and her government are far right. They could be or they could not be. It doesn't matter because that's not the issue. The issue is McKay's argument. In the article, he writes, quote, my Italian friends don't get the fuss. This is everyday politics, they say. A simple branding exercise to soften Meloni's image. Perhaps. But there's a deeper and frankly stranger side to this story. When The Lord of the Rings first hit Italian shelves in the 1970s, the academic Elimir Zola wrote a short introduction in which he interpreted the book as an allegory about pure ethnic groups defending themselves against contamination from foreign invaders. Right, so I know where this is going. McKay's going to claim that there's just something about Tolkien's works that make it easy for people to make this argument about keeping out the foreigners. And if that's what you think, you clearly didn't read the books. That's the loosest, weakest, least favorable interpretation of Tolkien's writings. And I'm not wrong. McKay does exactly what I assumed he would. Quote, fascist sympathizers in the Movimento Sociale Italiano, MIS, quickly jumped on the provocation. Inspired by Zola's words, they saw Tolkien's world as a space where they could explore their ideology in socially acceptable terms, free of the taboos of the past. Meloni, an MSI Youth Wing member, developed her political consciousness in that environment. As a teenager, she even attended a Hobbit camp, a summer retreat organized by the MSI, in which participants dressed up in cosplay outfits, sang along to folk ballads, and discussed how Tolkienian mythologies could help the post-fascist right find credibility in a new era. Yes, and what does that have to do with Tolkien? The line McKay is trying to draw is that there's just something about Tolkien's work that lends itself to these far-right ideas, but that's true of most stories told in a fashion like Tolkien's. His works deal in a fair amount of Manichaean dichotomy, the contrast between good and evil. It doesn't take much effort to twist this to fit some reactionary ideology. How can you use that as an indictment against Tolkien and his works when it's so common? McKay has an answer, quote, obviously we're talking about a fringe movement here, but it's worth recognizing that, with little imagination, the sagas of Middle-earth do fit pretty neatly into the logic of contemporary right-wing populism. The Lord of the Rings follows the logic of a zero-sum game, rooted in Catholic metaphysics. There are good hobbits and elves who fight off evil orcs. There's a little space for nuance. Tell me you've never read The Lord of the Rings without telling me you've never read The Lord of the Rings. That story is full of nuance. We could just start with the hobbits. They're certainly treated as essentially good and representative of what Tolkien considers an idyllic state. However, the Sackville Bagginses aren't exactly the nicest people. Lobelia is especially ill-tempered and greedy, and her son Lotho ends up working with Saruman and Wormtongue to control the Shire. McKay's claim completely falls short with the elves, and I need only use one name to prove it: Feanor. The things Feanor and his sons and descendants do lead to much of the tragedy experienced in Middle-earth well through to The Lord of the Rings. Even with orcs, Tolkien states in his letters that he struggled with the idea of the orcs being irredeemably evil. It was possible, although extremely difficult, for an orc to do or be good. This is made even clearer with the race of men, who can easily be corrupted by dark powers, but clearly also had the capacity for good. The idea was that anyone can be evil because there's something dark within all of us is a core theme in Tolkien's works. I don't know how you could read them and miss that, but somehow McKay found a way. He then says, quote, while most of us probably read the good characters in apolitical terms, it doesn't take much effort to bend that definition to nationalist purposes. Yeah, but that has nothing to do with Tolkien. Just because someone chooses to interpret a story a certain way doesn't mean that was a storyteller's intent. Tolkien is on record stating numerous times how much he disliked regimes and extreme cultural tribalism. You need only read his letters to see this. Speaking of which, in a couple of weeks, there's going to be an updated version released of the Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, which will now include 150 previously unreleased letters. You might want to hop over to Amazon to pre-order a copy, and maybe send one McKay's way, because I have a feeling he's never read them. Anyway, just because some far-right nutjobs try to twist Tolkien's works to fit their hyper-conservative, backwards narratives doesn't mean Tolkien's works expressed, let alone shared, those views. Tolkien has no control over how people interpret his works, or whether they try to use it to fight some culture war battle, what with him being dead and all. So, if Maloney and her far-right followers glom onto Tolkien, that's unfortunate, but that doesn't prove that his stories have anything to do with their retarded politics. The bigger issue is that McKay never answers the most basic questions that arise from his critique. What are we supposed to do about this? Are we to condemn people using Tolkien's works as political propaganda? Are we to try to stop them from doing this? Are we to go after Tolkien's works themselves? What are we to do with them? Censor them? Change them? Rewrite them so that they can't be used by people with bad ideas? If these far-right douches are using Tolkien's works to draw in followers, I think your concern should be on why that works rather than that it's being used. Like I said before, Tolkien's works aren't the only things that can be used this way. Any work of fiction could be used, from Star Wars to Marvel movies to Harry Potter or the right's usual favorite, the Bible. Any of these could be twisted to fit their narratives, some more easily than others. You should care more about why that is instead of trying to tarnish Tolkien's works via guilt by non-association. Like I said, there's nothing in his works that actually back these people's ideas, and he's on record, in his own words written by his own hands, telling them to go sit on a broken bottle and twist. The Lord of the Rings isn't fascist propaganda. Tolkien had no love for those people. This isn't the fight you're looking for. Let it go. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.